No matter how much societies need and want progress, that movement forward will always be opposed by a certain entrenched elite who like things just the way they are and aren't quite willing to allow reshuffling of the deck. So, what is the solution to the influence of these entrenched elites? It's the one thing they can't possibly resist: the passage of time. No matter how hard they clutch the reins of power, it always passes steadily with each passing day to the next generation. This is good for those of us in Cardano. The younger generations will come of age as crypto natives raised in a post Satoshi world. Time is definitely on our side. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss a new survey revealing some interesting things about crypto and demographics, the SEC's latest target, Gary Gensler finding disfavor even among his own party, an admirable attempt at getting regulatory clarity, and a Pavia update. If you're old enough to know that this thumbnail is a crypto homage to a Nirvana album cover, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Right now, we're in the middle of a pretty unpleasant crypto crackdown, but it's important to put this in the context of what's coming. So here's a study by Morning Consult that they did on behalf of Coinbase. So Coinbase obviously paid for this study, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's not a huge sample size. It's only 2,202 US adults. So not a huge sample size, but the results are pretty interesting. So here's here are some of the bigger results. Among US adults, the top word associations with the global financial system: expensive, unfair, and confusing. 80% of Americans say the global financial system unfairly favors powerful interest. 67% agree that the financial system needs major changes or a complete overhaul. And only 4% say that no changes are needed. It's pretty easy to contrast this with what we see among policymakers in Washington. Policymakers in Washington seem pretty okay with the way things work right now. They're pretty good with TradFi. Why? Because a lot of them previously worked for TradFi. You look at the regulators in, all of the financial regulatory agencies. A huge portion of them worked on Wall Street. They all worked in TradFi. That's why they're there. I mean, and to be fair, it's pretty hard to find someone who could understand TradFi well enough to regulate it in the past. But that was in the past. In the past, we had former TradFi people who understood TradFi regulating TradFi, which was probably a good idea. You need to understand something to regulate it. But now what we have are a bunch of old TradFi people. And when I say old, I mean former. It has nothing to do with their age. It's just the fact that they are TradFi people. They're regulating crypto, which some of them understand, but I'm sure some of them don't understand. So here's something very interesting. We tend to think in crypto a lot about crypto, and it's easy to come to the conclusion that the crypto perspective is very, very different than the perspective of the general population. This survey indicates that is not necessarily true. So the darkest red in this little bar up here are the people who think that the financial system, needs a complete overhaul. It's exactly the same number among the general population and the crypto investors. The slightly lighter red is the percentage who think that the financial system needs major changes. Again, very similar numbers, 40% and 47%. Needs minor changes is this next bar, 17 and 20. Does not need changes, 2 and 4. Don't know, no opinion, 5 and 12. Very similar results. People in the general population and crypto are basically equally dissatisfied with the traditional financial system. Likelihood to trade crypto. This is interesting. Obviously, you're going to have a much larger number among the crypto investors, 84% and 29%. But this number changes when we talk about younger generations. This is just among sort of all adults. And when we look at younger generations, the numbers get really interesting. So, current crypto ownership is highest among younger Americans. No surprise. Gen Z, 36% have crypto. Millennials, 30% have crypto. It's a little bit different than the number in the general population who are expecting to trade crypto. But the number who are expecting to make crypto purchases among Gen Z, 39%, and millennials, 45%. This is an interesting number. Think about that. 45% of millennials are expecting to make crypto purchases. 54% of Gen Z and 55% of millennials agree that cryptocurrency and blockchain are the future. So it's interesting that it's consistent. You'd think that it'd be even higher among Gen Z, but millennials are actually 1 point higher. But importantly, a majority of both Gen Z and millennials agree that crypto and blockchain are the future. Could policymakers behave the way they're behaving right now in 2023 if all of the voters held this view? If a majority of all voters, not just Gen Z and millennials, agreed that crypto and blockchain in the future, could policymakers do what they're doing right now? No, they could not. And in fact, the policymakers, the financial policymakers that we have now, the financial regulators we have now, pretty much all of whom came out of TradFi, they probably couldn't even be the regulators if all of the voters thought that crypto and blockchain are the future. Some of the regulators would have to come from crypto and the blockchain world. 27% of Gen Z and 21% of millennials considered creating an account on a cryptocurrency exchange in the past 12 months. This was actually a little bit lower than I expected, but it could just, I don't know what the questions look like exactly in the survey. It could be that a large majority of them, or a large portion of them, already had accounts. I'm not considering creating an account on a crypto exchange in the next 12 months, and I didn't really consider creating one in the last 12 months because I already had accounts. What's interesting about some of these numbers is where it puts us on the timeline. I remember, because I had sort of this analog childhood and digital young adulthood and adulthood, I remember when we were about here with internet usage. I remember when it seemed like only myself and maybe a third of my friends were really using the internet regularly. That seems like it would be so long ago, but really it was within my lifetime. And I remember when, likelihood to use the internet sometimes in the next year might have looked like this. And the reason the numbers were so low then was because it wasn't easy to use the internet. You had to kind of understand how to use a modem. And then it got a little easier. We were in the CompuServe days. Then it got a little easier. We were in the AOL days. We were still using a modem with the whole dial up thing. It wasn't as easy as the internet now when you just open your laptop and you're live on the internet. It feels like we're kind of, especially given these numbers, it feels like we're kind of in those days for crypto. 30% of millennials and 36% of Gen Z say they own crypto right now. But when crypto gets much more pervasive, when it's much easier to use, when we're no longer in sort of the BBS days, this would have been an even lower number back in the old days when the only thing available on the internet was, these super kind of niche bulletin board systems. I mean, I think back in those days, before there was even anything mainstream available on the internet, I mean, these numbers would have been even lower. So maybe given these numbers, we're somewhere in between the BBS days and the AOL days. But it does feel like we're so early. And I think these numbers are going to be crazy high. By the time Gen Z, and I guess the generation even younger than them is Generation Alpha, I think. By the time these generations come of age, I think these numbers, just like the numbers as far as internet usage, went from about this level when I was younger to something much, much, much higher by the time I became an adult. I think the same thing is going to happen for these generations. Right now, crypto is not so easy to use, but by the time they get to be adults, it is going to be pretty easy to use. And I think these numbers are going to skyrocket. as that begins to happen, it's going to be politically untenable. No, let me rephrase that. It's going to be political suicide for any party in power in Washington to put in place a regulator like Gary Gensler with the agenda that he obviously has. If they want to get reelected, they're not going to be able to create this kind of climate for crypto. If these numbers do what I think they're going to do, it would be impossible to expect to get reelected and do what the current administration is doing to us right now. I guess I should rephrase for the sake of accuracy. The interwebs tells me that Gen Zers are technically between 11 and 26. So a good portion of them are technically adults. They're in between 18 and 26. But it's going to be really different when there aren't so many baby boomers out there and there aren't so many Gen Xers. And then the political campaigns are really going to have to look at millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And based on these numbers, that's going to be a very different public opinion climate in regards to crypto. Gen Z, millennials, Gen Alpha, they're going to look at crypto in a very different way than Gen X and baby boomers because they were basically raised, at least Gen Z and Alpha, were raised in this post-Satoshi world when the promise of crypto was something that existed their entire lives. Whereas for baby boomers and even a lot of older Gen Xers, this is something brand new. It wasn't a part of their world even. A lot of them made their careers, made livings, in the TradFi world, or at least having to deal with the TradFi world. And this whole new crypto thing, it's viewed very differently by those generations than it will be by these younger generations. And I think the political policy we're suffering under right now, it won't possibly be able to exist in just a short amount of time because every day we have fewer baby boomers, fewer Gen Xers, and these younger generations become more and more important. Do you want to know who is the latest victim in the SEC crypto crackdown? Not really even a crypto native business. It was actually Robinhood. So, Robinhood, in a filing just today, admitted that they had received an investigative subpoena in December from the SEC related to their crypto business, apparently. So, I think there are probably a lot of these subpoenas out there that we don't know about right now. I think after FTX, probably a lot of subpoenas went out, and maybe we haven't even heard about all of them yet. I mean, we only heard about this one because Robinhood is a public company, and they have to disclose such things in their filings. But there might be a lot of subpoenas like this out there with companies that don't have such periodic filing requirements. And I think as 2023 kind of rolls along, we're going to find out that a lot has already even happened up to today that we don't know about yet. Here's a great thread about something that people don't focus on very much, and that's that neither party seems to love Gary Gensler. Even his own party, at least a number of members of his own party, seem pretty unhappy with the agenda he's been pursuing related to crypto. So this thread says, it is rare for the party in control of the administration to receive flack from their own camp. However, Gensler's actions have received public and vocal criticism from a number of Democrats, and the list keeps growing as he pushes forward. This could be problematic for him in the future. And don't forget, he has a big ambitions of becoming Treasury Secretary. How can he do that if his own party won't vote to confirm him? So here we have some examples. Senator Gillibrand, who famously was the Democratic co-sponsor of the Gillibrand-Lummis bill, which was a pretty good regulatory framework for crypto that, of course, vanished as soon as we got FTX. Senator Gillibrand said 2 weeks ago, I have many concerns about Chairman Gensler and his approach to this crypto space. Senator Hick penned a letter to Gensler calling for a transparent notice and comment regulatory process rather than the status quo. One of the most damning lines came from House Financial Services and Progressive Representative Ritchie, who bluntly said, my sense of Gensler is he strikes me as a politician pretending to be a regulator. And we've talked about some of his comments in committee before. He definitely seems to understand what's going on. There are others who hold this view in Congress but aren't as vocal. There are many more examples in the House, but the Senate Democrats are important because they can cripple Gensler politically if he doesn't have all the Democrats in his camp. They can block Senate confirmations of potential SEC officials or future nominations for Gensler himself. Recall, here's where it gets really interesting. Recall, Gensler received an 88-6 vote for his 2009 nomination for the CFTC. So pretty easy. He got confirmed pretty easily back in 2009. And then he went into the CFTC and people weren't exactly happy with what he did. So when it came to his confirmation in 2021, he received a 53-45 vote. Not an easy confirmation. These are very different numbers. He was confirmed by 88 with 6 opposing him in 2009. And in 2021, it was a 53-45 vote. This was to get him into the SEC. Now, after all this SEC stuff, what would this vote look like now? If they held this vote today, what would this look like? I'm not so sure that these numbers aren't reversed. While politics has gotten more partisan since 2009 and the SEC is a more polarizing role, it is apparent favor in the Senate is not as strong for him. And this thread goes on to point out that it's not just about crypto. There are a whole host of other areas where Gensler and the SEC are also being aggressive: ESG, clawbacks, SEC staff union, and more. Each fight has a political cost. So there is a price to be paid for what he's trying to do with crypto. I mean, if Gensler wants to be Secretary of the Treasury, he definitely needs for his own party to be on his side, and it's not clear he has that right now. Here's something interesting that I wish worked. So this post says, there is an important crypto case brewing in federal court in San Diego. Huddle Law has sued the SEC, asking the court to declare that Ether and the Ethereum network are not securities. So he just wants the court to declare that Ethereum is not a security. I wish this worked, because we could have just sued the SEC back in 2010 and demanded that the court declare that Bitcoin's not a security, that cryptos aren't a security. When Ethereum came along, Cardano, all these, it would have been like priority number one. Just sue the SEC, ask the court for a declaration that crypto is not a security. Then we would have had absolute regulatory clarity from day one of every cryptocurrency. That would have been wonderful. But definitely what actually happens when you file a suit like this is that the SEC just files a motion to dismiss. Here is the SEC's motion to dismiss. And right in their introduction, they give you the basis for their motion to dismiss. They say, HODL law does not identify any actions that the SEC has taken that impose rights or obligations on HODL law or any other person, and does not identify any obligation that the SEC has to resolve the legal issues HODL law seeks to have this court resolve. So the SEC says, hey, you're asking the court to give you a declaratory judgment on this issue about Ethereum, but the SEC isn't involved in any kind of controversy with you, HODL law, and the SEC doesn't have any duty to declare Ethereum to be a security or not a security. And down here on page 11, we can get down there. Let's see there's 13, 12. On page 11, they elaborate a little bit. They say, the complaint specifically alleges the SEC has not taken a final action providing its view of Ethereum or Ether under federal securities laws. Let's see, where does it pick back up? The complaint also alleges that the SEC has not provided HODL law with any assurances related to HODL law's use of the Ethereum network. Thus, HODL law's own allegations make clear that the SEC has not reached a final decision about the Ethereum network or Ether. This is pretty interesting. They also say, SEC Chair Gensler has never clarified whether his public musings about the security status of Ethereum and Ether are his personal opinion or SEC policy. So they're pretty much saying, yeah, you're right. We haven't come to any decision about Ethereum and Ether. They say the only SEC action the HODL law challenges is that the SEC has not issued final decisions about the Ethereum network and Ether. And they're like, yeah, you're right. We haven't. So why are you suing us? we don't have any kind of a duty as the SEC to give you a final decision. And we're saying, yeah, you're right. We haven't come to a final decision. So there's not really a controversy here for you to sue on. This poster describes that revelation as astounding. And I think that that sentiment is probably shared by a lot of crypto. It's kind of astounding that the agency in charge of that says it's the one who should be in charge of regulating crypto has not reached a final decision about whether or not the Ethereum network or Ether are securities. I mean, Ethereum's been around for a long time now, and the SEC has existed that entire time. So, can you really claim to be the right regulator if you haven't figured this out after most of a decade? Finally, it looks like Pavia is giving us a nice little update here. This post says, just stretching some avatar legs through the first Pavia Plaza district, which we are busy refining and polishing. District 3 reveal before the end of March. What does this mean? What does reveal mean? Does this mean we can actually get in there and run around? Like we can actually use this district of the plaza? I'm not sure exactly what reveal means, but I'm looking forward to it. I hope your week is starting out great, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.